All right, let's just jump right into this explainer because we're looking at one of the absolute wildest contrasts in modern movies. On one side, you've got the total jaw-dropping spectacle of the Top Gun franchise. But on the other side, you've got the awful, grueling, and honestly pretty hilarious physical realities the cast had to survive to make that spectacle happen. Today, we're going to see how Tom Cruise's absolute obsession with practical stunts created this massive cultural phenomenon. But it also practically forced his co-stars to endure real-world extremes that most of us literally could not stomach. I mean, we are talking high-altitude bodily fluids, punishing diets, and physical pressure that actually crushes you into your seat. So let's get a quick reality check from actor Jay Ellis, who played Payback in Top Gun Maverick. He figured out pretty fast that acting inside a fighter jet, yeah, it's not exactly as glamorous as it looks on the big screen. Picture this. You've finally got all your gear on, you're strapped tight into an F-18, adrenaline is just pumping, and you are ready to be a massive movie star. But then, you just sit there, on the tarmac, for 45 minutes while the crew warms up the jet and does safety checks. And it's right about then that the bottle of water you drank earlier really catches up with you. Like Ellis pointed out, it's not like you can just pop out of an F-18 for a quick bathroom break. Once you're strapped into that machine, you are completely at the mercy of the environment. But dealing with that kind of intense physical discomfort, that is literally just the price of admission if you want to work with Tom Cruise. His absolute 100% commitment to giving audiences a real, tangible experience has driven over $10 billion in lifetime box office sales. $10 billion. When Tom commits to a role, he goes all in. No faking it. He wants you, the audience, to feel the actual thrill of the action. And that philosophy has built a track record that is basically unmatched in Hollywood history. To really grasp this, you just have to look at how insane his stunts have gotten over the years. I mean, the guy is constantly pushing the envelope. Back in 2011, he's scaling the tallest building in the world in Dubai. Jump to 2015, he is literally strapped to the outside of a massive cargo plane taking off, actively worrying about getting hit by birds. 2018, climbing up a helicopter mid-flight. And then in 2020, for day one of filming Mission Impossible, he decides to just drive a motorcycle off a cliff into a base jump. He risks broken bones, he risks separated ribs, and he routinely flies completely without insurance, all to get that one perfect practical shot. That is the baseline expectation when you sign on the dotted line for a Tom Cruise movie. And this absolute demand for reality required a massive technical leap from the original 1986 blueprint to the 2022 sequel. See, back in 1986, the actors were filmed strictly on the ground, or in these mechanical gimbals. The gorgeous aerial shots were captured totally separately by real Navy pilots. But when Top Gun Maverick rolled around, faking it on a green screen was absolutely off the table. Cruise mandated that the actors had to be up in the sky, sitting in the back of real F-18 jets, experiencing the actual real-world flight dynamics. But hey, making that first movie back in the 80s was no walk in the park either. They initially hit a massive brick wall with the Department of Defense. The Navy actually rejected the original script outright because they were really concerned about the language and how their pilots would be portrayed. Luckily, a lobbyist managed to slide the script over to the Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman. And Lehman, he instantly saw the big picture. He knew the incredible publicity value this could have, so he championed the project. And, as we all know now, it turned into the ultimate recruitment tool for the military, with young people literally lining up to volunteer. And the craziest part? They pulled off all this cultural impact on a budget of just $15 to $16 million. Now, Tom's focus wasn't just on the cool hardware, right? He and director Tony Scott knew that to make this work, they absolutely had to build a memorable cast to carry the emotional weight. So they bring in Anthony Edwards to play Goose, basically because the guy just radiates this warmth and charm that makes you instantly love him. Then you've got Val Kilmer as Iceman, bringing this incredibly powerful, almost dangerous presence to the screen. Literally the perfect rival for Maverick. And Kelly McGillis as Charlie, who they described on set as a brilliant light bulb bursting into the room. This exact ensemble is what grounded all that high-flying action and gave it real human stakes. Okay, fast forward to the 2022 sequel. Cruise knows the absolute sheer torture he's about to put his new cast through, so he personally designs an intense flight training program. He basically gifts his co-stars 45 hours of flight prep before they are even allowed to touch an F-18. And let's be clear, this wasn't some fun weekend joyride. This was a grueling, step-by-step acclimation process just to make sure they wouldn't instantly pass out the second the jets hit the afterburners. To capture what it actually feels like to be strapped to a fire-breathing dragon, the crew had to invent a completely new, revolutionary system. They somehow packed 6 IMAX-quality cameras into those tiny, cramped cockpits right alongside the terrified actors. We're talking pilots flying them through the famous Star Wars canyons, literally just 100 feet off the ground, blazing fast at 500 knots. And since there's obviously zero room for a camera crew in there, the actors had to operate the cameras themselves. They had to check their own lighting and somehow remember to deliver their lines perfectly, all while hurtling from the sky. But the wildest part is the extreme physical toll this takes on the human body. When they were weaving through those canyons, going totally inverted, the jets would pull up super aggressively. The cast was regularly getting crushed by up to 8 Gs. Just to put that into perspective for you, that is the equivalent of 1,600 pounds of force just pressing down on your chest and your face. As the filmmakers pointed out, there is no way to act that kind of facial distortion. What you're seeing on screen, that is 100% real, unadulterated physical agony. So how do you cope with that kind of insane stress? Well, the cast really leaned hard into real-world aviator humor. Take Glenn Powell, right? He originally wanted some tough, awesome call sign like Slayer. But real Navy call signs don't work like that. They usually come from making super embarrassing mistakes. Powell ended up proudly taking the name Hangman after hearing a hilarious story from a real pilot whose call sign was Noose. And why Noose? Well, back in middle school, the guy got a little too hyped for a school dance, tried to tie a shoelace around his leg as a joke, got it hopelessly stuck, and actually had to be cut free by his buddy. That incredible mix of elite skill and total self-deprecating humor, that became the lifeblood of the whole cast. Now, the suffering definitely did not stop when they landed. You remember that iconic volleyball scene from the first movie, right? Well, the sequel obviously needed its own version, the oiled-up dogfight football scene on the beach. To prep for this, the cast starved themselves of carbs for almost 5 months straight just to get perfectly chiseled. They go out, shoot the scene on this gorgeous San Diego day, covered in baby oil, and then finally celebrate by crushing beers and eating pizza. But the very next morning, they get the absolute worst news imaginable. They're told the lighting wasn't right and they have to reshoot the whole thing in 3 weeks, meaning they had to immediately restart that brutal diet. And yes, some of them literally cried. And then, of course, there were the airborne bodily fluids. Tom Cruise might have a stomach made of iron, but his co-stars? Not so much. Glenn Powell actually found himself in the back of an F-18 feeling extremely nauseous. He didn't want to look weak in front of his badass pilot, so he tried to play it cool, politely asking for a quick break to check out the view so he could secretly throw up in his little bag. But he was in such a rush to be discreet, he accidentally unplugged his mask's microphone right as he ripped it off to get sick. Because the mic unplugged, his pilot didn't hear the second half of his sentence asking for a break. The pilot just hears the first part, goes, "Well, buddy, if you're ready to rock and roll, let's rock and roll," and immediately rips the jet into a massively aggressive high-G maneuver. So Powell, who is currently staring down into his little barf bag, is suddenly hit by 8 Gs. This caused a horrifying cycle where, as he described it, the puke he just puked was violently puked right back into his own face. I mean, that is quite literally the ultimate nightmare scenario. Meanwhile, Jay Ellis was dealing with a completely different kind of biological emergency at 700 miles per hour. Because he drank that water on the tarmac, he realized mid-flight that he desperately needed to pee. His pilot hands him this military pee bag, which is basically a pouch full of granules that turns liquid into gel, and just tells him, "Good luck, man." Somehow, Ellis actually wrestles his flight suit open and uses the bag while hurtling through the sky. But the real comedy? That happened after they landed. Still totally buzzing on flight adrenaline, Ellis struts straight into a film review room. We're talking a room packed with Oscar-winning editors, top-tier Navy brass, and Tom Cruise himself. Ellis sits down, starts eating his lunch, and casually plops his bag of solidifying urine right onto the table next to his food. Cruise looks over, completely bewildered, and asks what exactly that is. When Ellis proudly explains his mid-air accomplishment, Cruise just stares at him and delivers a very rare but entirely justified reprimand. "Could you please take your pee out of our production meeting?" But you know what? Despite everything, despite the recycled vomit, the pee bag on the snack table, the actual tears over restarting diets, and the bone-crushing G-forces, this agonizing, relentless push for absolute practical filmmaking paid off in a historic way. Top Gun Maverick didn't just do well. It resonated across the entire globe, becoming the very first billion-dollar movie of Tom Cruise's entire career. Audiences could just feel the reality of that struggle on screen, and they rewarded it massively. So, as we wrap up this explainer, you really have to stop and ask yourself something. When you look at this wild contrast between Tom Cruise's almost superhuman drive and the messy, hilarious reality of what his co stars went through, if you were handed the opportunity of a lifetime, the chance to fly in a real F 18 and cement your place in cinema history, what extreme lengths would you go to? Would you be willing to brave the G forces, the endless diets, and the absolute guarantee of motion sickness?